Sir, he needs to leave this seat immediately. His ticket is not valid.
Sir, stand up please or you will be removed from this aircraft. This is my assigned seat. My boarding pass is right here. Everything is legitimate. Last chance, sir.
April 15th, 2025. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. 6:45 in the morning. Flight attendant Sarah Collins, employee number 47,821 with 7 years at Delta Airlines, walked through first class on flight 2847 and stopped when she saw William Hayes, a black man in seat 2A, reading on his tablet. She approached him with immediate suspicion, demanded to see his boarding pass, accused him of having a fraudulent ticket, and when Hayes showed her his valid first-class boarding pass proving he'd paid $1,800 for the seat, she called it fake and summoned airport security to have him forcibly removed from the aircraft. Security officer Jake Morrison boarded the plane, reviewed Hayes's legitimate boarding pass, and nevertheless sided with the flight attendant, ordering Hayes to stand up immediately or face physical removal. And when Captain Dennis Hart emerged from the cockpit, he backed his crew without question. What they didn't know was that they had just racially profiled a federal judge with 15 years on the bench, that their coordinated lies about Hayes being disruptive were being destroyed by video evidence from 8 passengers recording on their phones, and that their decision to remove a black man from first class based purely on the color of his skin would end with a $1.8 million settlement, 3 destroyed careers, and a viral video with 35 million views that would become a case study in airline discrimination. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. And if you believe paying for first class while black shouldn't result in being thrown off a plane, hit that subscribe button. William Hayes wasn't just any passenger on Delta Flight 2847. He was one of the most respected federal judges in the Southern District of Georgia. Born September 12, 1973 in Savannah, Georgia. His father, Robert Hayes, worked as a postal worker for 32 years. His mother, Dorothy, was a librarian at the Savannah Public Library for 28 years. They raised William and his 3 siblings in a modest home on the east side of Savannah. William attended Savannah Public Schools, advanced placement classes, National Honor Society, student body president his senior year. He graduated from Windsor Forest High School in 1991 with a 4.0 GPA and a full academic scholarship to Morehouse College. At Morehouse, he majored in political science, made Dean's List every semester, served as president of the Pre-Law Society, graduated summa cum laude in 1995. He was accepted to Yale Law School with a full scholarship. At Yale, he was on law review. He worked summers at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. He graduated in 1998 in the top 10% of his class with his Juris Doctor degree. He clerked for a federal appeals court judge for 2 years, then joined a prestigious Atlanta law firm specializing in civil rights litigation. He tried 47 cases in 7 years, won 41 of them. He became known as one of the best trial attorneys in Georgia. In 2007, at age 34, he was nominated for a federal judgeship for the Southern District of Georgia. The Senate confirmed him unanimously. He became one of the youngest federal judges in the country. For 15 years, Judge William Hayes presided over some of the most significant cases in Georgia: voting rights cases, police misconduct cases, corporate discrimination cases. He wrote 412 published opinions. He was known for meticulous legal reasoning, fairness to all parties, and zero tolerance for discrimination in his courtroom. He served on the Federal Judicial Conference. He lectured at law schools across the country. He mentored young black attorneys trying to break into the legal profession. He'd won the American Bar Association's Distinguished Service Award in 2022. By April 2025, Judge Hayes was earning $223,400 per year in his federal position. He owned a home in Buckhead. He had retirement savings. He had security clearance for sensitive cases. He was a sitting federal judge who had sworn to uphold the Constitution. And on April 15, 2025, a Delta flight attendant looked at him sitting in first class and decided he didn't belong there because he was black. Sarah Collins had been with Delta Airlines for 7 years. She joined in 2018 as a flight attendant on domestic routes. By 2025, she'd worked herself into a regular assignment on first-class cabins for premium routes. And over those 7 years, she developed what internal HR records would later describe as a documented pattern of questioning black passengers in premium seating. Collins had been named in 11 formal complaints during her 7-year career. 9 of those complaints came from black passengers who alleged she treated them differently than white passengers in first class. 2 complaints specifically alleged she questioned their right to be in premium seats or asked to see additional identification beyond what she requested from white passengers. All 11 complaints had been reviewed by Delta's HR department. All 11 had been dismissed as misunderstandings or closed without discipline. Collins received 1 verbal counseling in 2021 after a complaint from a black doctor who said Collins asked him 3 times if he was sure his first-class upgrade was legitimate. But no formal discipline, no retraining, no consequences. Internal Delta data told the real story that HR had ignored. Over 3 years from 2022 to 2025, Collins worked 847 flights with first-class cabins. Flight manifests and passenger surveys revealed she questioned boarding passes or seat assignments for 63 passengers during that period. Of those 63 passengers, 58 were black or Hispanic, 92% of her challenges. In an airline where black and Hispanic passengers made up approximately 31% of first-class travelers. And of those 63 questioned passengers, only 4 actually had incorrect seats or invalid tickets. A 6% accuracy rate, which meant 94% of the people Collins stopped and questioned were legally entitled to be exactly where they were. Collins had a specific pattern. She targeted black passengers in window and aisle seats in rows 1 through 4, the most premium first-class seats. She would approach with skepticism, ask to see boarding passes multiple times, question whether passengers had paid for first class or used upgrades, and sometimes call supervisors to verify tickets that were completely valid. Her colleagues had noticed. 3 other flight attendants had reported concerns about Collins to supervisors. One wrote in an internal email, "Sarah seems to assume black passengers in first class are there by mistake or fraud. I've seen her check the same passenger's boarding pass 3 times on a single flight." Nothing was done. Collins continued working first-class cabins. Her supervisors considered her professional and thorough. The complaints kept getting dismissed. Until April 15, 2025, when she approached a black man in seat 2A and decided he couldn't possibly afford to be there. And that black man happened to be a federal judge who could destroy her career with a single court filing. For camera systems captured what happened on Delta Flight 2847 that morning. The first was the aircraft security system. Delta maintains HD cameras in every wide-body aircraft. 1 at the boarding door, 1 covering first class, 1 in the main cabin, and 1 in the galley. All recording continuously to encrypted cloud storage with 90-day retention. The second was Jake Morrison's body camera. All airport security personnel at Hartsfield-Jackson wear chest-mounted cameras that activate when they respond to incidents. Morrison turned his on before boarding the aircraft. The third system was actually 8 separate cameras, passenger cell phones. When Morrison boarded and approached seat 2A, passengers in rows 1, 2, 3, and 4 immediately started recording. 8 different angles. 8 witnesses with video proof. The fourth camera was the gate area security camera, which captured Morrison and Collins talking before boarding, showing their coordination before confronting Hayes. For camera systems, multiple angles. Continuous footage creating an irrefutable record of what happened when a flight attendant racially profiled a federal judge and 2 Delta employees backed her without question. William Hayes had booked seat 2A on Delta Flight 2847 3 weeks in advance. He was returning to Washington, D.C. after presiding over a week-long trial in Savannah. The case had just concluded, and he needed to be back in D.C. for a federal judicial conference starting that afternoon. He'd paid $1,800 for first class using his personal American Express card. He preferred window seats for the privacy to review case files during flights. His ticket was legitimate, purchased through Delta's website, confirmed 3 times via email. Hayes arrived at the airport at 6:15 a.m. for the 7:45 a.m. departure. He went through TSA pre-check without issue. His carry-on bag contained his laptop, his judicial robes for the conference, and confidential case files in a locked briefcase. He was wearing a navy suit, white dress shirt, and burgundy tie, his standard professional attire. He looked exactly like what he was, a successful professional traveling for work. He boarded at 6:42 a.m. during the first-class priority boarding call, walked down the jet bridge, handed his boarding pass to the gate agent, who scanned it, and said, "Have a good flight, Mr. Hayes." Stepped onto the aircraft. The first-class cabin had 16 seats in a 2-to-2 configuration. Hayes walked to row 2, placed his bag in the overhead compartment, and settled into seat 2A, the window seat on the left side. He pulled out his tablet, opened an encrypted file containing a brief he needed to review, and started reading. Around him, other passengers boarded. A white businessman in 1A, an elderly white couple in row 3, a white woman in 2C across the aisle, all settling in without incident. At 6:45 a.m., Sarah Collins emerged from the galley and began her pre-flight walkthrough of first class. She greeted the businessman in 1A with a smile, welcomed the couple in row 3, offered the woman in 2C a beverage. Then she reached row 2 and saw William Hayes, a black man in a premium window seat, reading on his tablet. Her expression changed. The aircraft security camera captured it, the shift from professional courtesy to immediate suspicion. She stopped walking and stared at Hayes for 3 full seconds before speaking. That's when everything went wrong. Sarah Collins stood in the aisle next to seat 2A, looking down at William Hayes with an expression that other passengers would later describe as suspicious and hostile. "Excuse me, sir," Collins said, her voice loud enough that passengers in rows 1 through 4 turned to look. "Can I see your boarding pass?" Hayes looked up from his tablet, slightly surprised. He'd already shown his boarding pass to the gate agent 30 seconds ago, but he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the paper boarding pass. "Here you go," Hayes said, handing it to her politely. Collins took it and examined it like she was inspecting a counterfeit bill. She turned it over, held it up to the light, checked the barcode. The examination lasted nearly 20 seconds, far longer than necessary for a simple seat verification. "This shows seat 2A, Collins finally said, still holding the boarding pass. "Is this really your ticket?" Hayes felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came whenever he experienced racial profiling. He'd been a federal judge for 15 years. He'd flown first class hundreds of times, and he'd been questioned about belonging there more times than he could count. "Yes," Hayes said calmly. "That's my assigned seat. I purchased that ticket 3 weeks ago." Collins's eyes narrowed. "First-class tickets are quite expensive. Did you pay for this, or did you use an upgrade?" The businessman in seat 1A inhaled sharply. The woman in 2C stopped scrolling on her phone. Both recognized what was happening, a black passenger being singled out for questions that white passengers never received. "I don't see how that's relevant," Hayes said, keeping his voice measured. "But I paid for it. Full price. With my credit card. Is there a problem?" Collins crossed her arms. "I need to verify this ticket is legitimate. Stay here." She walked toward the front galley with Hayes's boarding pass, leaving him sitting there without his ticket. Hayes watched her pull out a phone and make a call. She was 15 feet away, but he could hear fragments. "Suspicious passenger in 2A. Need to verify. Doesn't look right." The woman in 2C leaned toward Hayes. "This is ridiculous," she said quietly. She didn't ask to see anyone else's boarding pass. "I know," Hayes said. He'd been through this before, but never this aggressively. Collins returned 2 minutes later, still holding his boarding pass. "Sir, I've spoken with my supervisor. We need you to move to the economy cabin while we verify your ticket." Hayes felt his anger rising but kept his voice calm. "My ticket is valid. My name is on it. My seat assignment is correct. I'm not moving. Sir, if you don't cooperate, I'll have to call security," Collins said, her voice rising. "Then call security," Hayes said. "Because I'm not leaving a seat I paid $1,800 to sit in based on your assumption that I don't belong here." Collins's face flushed. She turned and walked quickly toward the front of the plane. Hayes could see her speaking into the phone again, gesturing animatedly toward his seat. The businessman in 1A stood up and walked over to Collins. The aircraft camera captured their conversation. "Excuse me," the businessman said. "I'm sitting in 1A. I saw this gentleman board with priority boarding. His ticket is clearly valid. What's the issue?" "Sir, this doesn't concern you," Collins said sharply. "Please return to your seat." "It concerns me when I'm watching racial profiling happen on my flight," the businessman said. He pulled out his phone and started recording. 3 more passengers in first class pulled out their phones. Now 4 cameras were recording. At 6:52 a.m., Airport Security Officer Jake Morrison boarded the aircraft. He wore a dark uniform with airport security across his chest and a body camera mounted on his vest. Collins met him at the boarding door and spoke with him for 45 seconds. The gate security camera captured her gestures towards seat 2A, her animated explanation, Morrison's nodding. Then Morrison walked directly to row 2. His body camera activated, recording his perspective. "Sir," Morrison said, standing in the aisle. "I need you to step off this aircraft." Hayes looked up at the security officer. "On what grounds?" "The flight attendant has indicated you're in a seat that may not be assigned to you," Morrison said. "My boarding pass shows I'm assigned to this seat," Hayes said. He gestured toward Collins, who was holding it. "She's still holding my boarding pass. It's completely valid." Morrison held out his hand. Collins gave him the boarding pass. He looked at it for maybe 3 seconds. "Sir, I need you to come with me while we verify this," Morrison said. "There's nothing to verify," Hayes said. "That boarding pass has my name, my seat assignment, my confirmation number. Everything is correct." "Sir, I'm not going to ask again," Morrison said. "Stand up and step off this aircraft, or I'll remove you." The woman in 2C spoke up. "Officer, I've been sitting right here. This man boarded during priority boarding. He's been sitting quietly reading. He hasn't caused any disturbance. She's the only one who has a problem with him being here." Morrison turned to her. "Ma'am, I need you to stay out of this." "I'm recording this," the woman said, holding up her phone. "And I'm happy to provide witness testimony that this is racial profiling." Another passenger in row 4 stood up. "I'm recording too. This is wrong." Morrison's jaw tightened. He was surrounded by passengers with phones up, all recording. The situation was escalating. "Sir," Morrison said to Hayes, his voice harder now. "Last chance. Stand up." Hayes pulled his wallet from his jacket pocket. He opened it and extracted his federal judicial credentials, the official ID card issued to all federal judges, complete with his photo, the federal court seal, and his title. Honorable William Hayes, United States District Judge, Southern District of Georgia. He held it up for Morrison to see. "I'm a federal judge," Hayes said clearly. "I've presided over federal cases for 15 years. I have top secret security clearance. I paid $1,800 for this first-class ticket with my personal credit card. That boarding pass you're holding is completely legitimate, and I am not moving from this seat." The color drained from Sarah Collins's face. Morrison's hand, which had been moving toward Hayes's arm, froze in midair. The businessman in 1A spoke loudly. "Did you hear that? He's a federal judge. You just tried to throw a federal judge off a plane for sitting in first class while black." Morrison stared at the judicial credentials in Hayes's hand. The official federal seal was clearly visible. The title was unmistakable. This wasn't some fake ID. This was a sitting federal judge. Morrison started, then stopped. He looked at Collins. She had gone pale and taken a step backward. At that moment, Captain Dennis Hart emerged from the cockpit. He was in his mid-50s, wearing his pilot's uniform with 4 stripes on the shoulders indicating his rank. He'd been called forward by Collins during her initial phone call. "What's going on back here?" Hart asked, his voice carrying authority. Morrison turned to him, clearly uncertain now. "Sir, there was a question about a passenger's ticket validity, but he's a federal judge." Hart looked at Hayes, then at the credentials still in his hand, then at Morrison, then at Collins. "A federal judge?" Hart repeated. "Yes, sir," Hayes said. He held up his credentials again so Hart could see them clearly. "Judge William Hayes. And I'd like to know why your flight attendant assumed my ticket was fraudulent, why she called security without cause, and why your security officer was prepared to physically remove me from a seat I legally purchased." Hart opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Collins. "Sarah, what happened?" Collins's voice was shaky now. I just wanted to verify his ticket. It seemed, first class is expensive and you assumed a black man couldn't afford it." The woman in 2C finished for her. "We all heard you question whether he paid for it or used an upgrade. You didn't ask anyone else that question." Another passenger spoke up. "I have the whole thing on video. Her approaching him, her questioning his ticket, her calling security. All of it." "So do I," said the businessman in 1A. "I've got it too," said someone in row 4. Hart realized what was happening. 8 passengers with phones up. A federal judge holding official credentials. His flight attendant and security officer who'd just tried to remove that federal judge from the plane based on racial profiling. "Judge Hayes," Hart said carefully, "I apologize for any inconvenience." "Inconvenience?" Hayes interrupted, his voice sharp now. "Your flight attendant racially profiled me. She accused me of having a fraudulent ticket with 0 evidence. She called security to have me removed from the aircraft. Your security officer threatened me with physical removal despite my valid boarding pass. This isn't an inconvenience, Captain. This is discrimination. This is a violation of my civil rights. and every second of it was captured on multiple cameras. Hart looked around at the passengers still recording. He looked at Morrison's body camera. He looked at the aircraft's security cameras he knew were recording everything. "Sir, I'm sure this was just a misunderstanding," Hart tried. "It wasn't a misunderstanding," Hayes said coldly. "It was racial profiling. And I will be filing formal complaints with Delta Airlines, the FAA, and airport security. I will be filing a federal civil rights lawsuit. And every passenger in this cabin is a witness to exactly what happened here." The businessman in 1A pulled out a business card. "Judge Hayes, I'm an attorney. Corporate law, not civil rights. But I'd be happy to provide witness testimony for your case. Here's my card." The woman in 2C did the same. "I'm a professor at Georgetown Law. I'll testify. I saw the whole thing." 3 more passengers offered cards and contact information. Hart looked at Collins and Morrison. Both stood there, understanding that their careers were ending in real time. "Judge Hayes," Hart said quietly, "what would you like us to do?" Hayes looked at him with an expression of pure contempt. "I want you to understand that you don't get to profile passengers based on skin color and then apologize your way out of the consequences. I want Collins and Morrison removed from my flight. And I want a formal record of this incident filed immediately." Hart nodded slowly. He turned to Collins and Morrison. "Both of you off the aircraft. Now." Collins' eyes widened. "Captain." "Now," Hart repeated. Collins and Morrison walked toward the exit, their careers effectively over the moment they stepped off the plane. Hayes sat back down in seat 2A. The passengers who'd been recording slowly lowered their phones. The woman in 2C reached over and squeezed his hand. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," she said. "So am I," Hayes said quietly. "But I'm not sorry they chose the wrong person to try it with." The flight departed 22 minutes late. And by the time it landed in D.C., the videos had already started going viral. Should airline staff be able to demand extra verification from passengers based on their race? Comment below. Because what Judge Hayes did next changed airline policy nationwide. Judge William Hayes didn't go quietly. The moment he arrived in D.C., he contacted 3 people: his attorney, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and the Office of Inspector General for the Department of Transportation. Within 24 hours, 8 passengers had provided their video footage to Hayes' legal team. The footage showed everything. Collins approaching Hayes differently than white passengers, her questioning his ability to pay for first class, her calling security without cause, Morrison threatening physical removal despite a valid ticket, and Hart initially backing his crew without investigation. The videos went viral within 48 hours. The woman from 2C, the Georgetown law professor, posted her footage on Twitter with the caption, "Watch Delta flight attendant racially profile a federal judge in first class." Airline backed her until he showed his credentials. This is America. That tweet was viewed 8 million times in the first day. By day 3, it had 35 million views. News outlets picked up the story. CNN, MSNBC, The Washington Post. Federal judge racially profiled on Delta flight became national news. Delta's initial response was a disaster. A spokesperson released a statement saying, "We take all passenger concerns seriously and are investigating this matter." The corporate non-apology enraged people. The Georgetown professor responded, 8 passengers have video. A federal judge filed a complaint. What exactly are you investigating? Whether black people are allowed in first class. That quote was on every news broadcast. 3 days after the incident, Delta's CEO issued a personal apology to Judge Hayes and announced Sarah Collins had been terminated for violation of company policy and federal civil rights laws. Jake Morrison was fired from airport security and banned from working at any airport nationwide. Captain Hart was suspended pending investigation. He was ultimately demoted to co-pilot and reassigned to cargo flights, effectively ending his career with Delta. But Hayes wasn't done. Terminating the employees who got caught wasn't enough. He wanted systemic change. The lawsuit was filed on May 3, 2025, 18 days after the incident. William Hayes versus Delta Airlines Incorporated, Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, Security Officer Jake Morrison, and Flight Attendant Sarah Collins. Charges: violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, racial discrimination in public accommodations, violation of the Fourth Amendment, unlawful detention, violation of the Fifth Amendment, deprivation of liberty without due process, intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, and violation of FAA passenger protection regulations. The complaint was 47 pages long. It detailed every second of the confrontation. It included testimony from 8 passenger witnesses. It attached video evidence from 9 different sources. It cited Collins's 11 prior complaints. It cited Morrison's 6 prior complaints about racial profiling. It cited Delta's repeated failure to discipline employees for discriminatory behavior. The lawsuit demanded $1.8 million in damages and sweeping policy reforms. Delta's legal team reviewed the evidence and knew they couldn't win at trial. 8 witnesses, 9 videos, a federal judge as the plaintiff, a documented pattern of discrimination. The optics were catastrophic. They offered to settle for $500,000 within 2 weeks. Hayes refused. They offered $800,000 a month later. Hayes refused. Hayes's attorney made it clear. Our client wants more than money. He wants accountability. He wants policy changes that prevent this from happening to anyone else. Delta offered $1.2 million plus mandatory bias training for all employees. Hayes refused. Finally, on September 15, 2025, 5 months after the incident, Delta capitulated. Settlement, $1.8 million, plus mandatory reforms. Bullet operator prohibition on asking passengers for additional verification of tickets unless there is specific, articulable evidence of fraud. Bullet operator prohibition on questioning passengers about payment methods or ability to afford tickets. Bullet operator required supervisory approval before calling security for any seating dispute. Bullet operator mandatory anti-bias training for all flight attendants, pilots, and security personnel with annual recertification. Bullet operator independent civilian oversight board with authority to review discrimination complaints. Bullet operator public quarterly reporting of all passenger removal incidents broken down by race. Bullet operator zero tolerance policy for racial profiling. First violation results in immediate termination. Everything Hayes demanded. Because Delta knew that going to trial meant a federal judge testifying about being racially profiled in front of 8 witnesses and 9 cameras. They'd lose, and the judgment would be higher than $1.8 million. Sarah Collins was 34 when she was fired from Delta. 7 years of seniority, benefits, and pension eligibility gone. The video of her questioning a federal judge's right to sit in first class had been viewed 35 million times. Her face was now permanently associated with airline discrimination. She couldn't work in aviation again. Every airline ran background checks that showed her termination for racial profiling. She took a job in retail, making $13 an hour. The video followed her everywhere. Jake Morrison was 41 when he lost his security clearance and job. He'd worked in airport security for 12 years. Now he was unemployable in any security role, any law enforcement position, or any job requiring background clearance. He worked warehouse night shifts for $15 an hour. He'd lost his pension. His wife divorced him after the video went viral, and their children faced harassment at school for being the racist security guard's kids. Captain Dennis Hart was 56 when Delta demoted him. 30 years as a pilot, 20 as a captain, reduced to co-pilot on overnight cargo flights with a 40% pay cut. He retired 2 years later, bitter and broken, his legacy destroyed by backing his flight attendant without asking questions. All 3 became cautionary tales taught in aviation training programs worldwide. Judge William Hayes used his settlement money to establish the Judicial Fairness Fund, providing legal assistance to people who experienced discrimination but couldn't afford attorneys. The fund helped 127 people in its first year. He continued serving as a federal judge and became a national voice on civil rights and airline discrimination. He testified before Congress on the need for stronger passenger protection laws. 5 years later, the video remained online, a permanent record of what happens when assumptions override evidence and when authority figures choose bias over investigation. The William Hayes case changed airline policy nationwide. Delta's reforms became the industry standard. American, United, Southwest, and JetBlue all adopted similar policies. The FAA issued new guidance on passenger rights and discrimination prevention. The video became required viewing in airline training programs. Flight attendants learned about unconscious bias, about questioning their assumptions, about treating every passenger with dignity regardless of race. The 8 passengers who recorded the incident and provided testimony became advocates for airline passenger rights. The Georgetown law professor used the case in her civil rights curriculum. Judge Hayes remained on the federal bench and continued his judicial career. He still flies first class for work. Airlines treat him with particular care now, terrified of becoming the next viral discrimination story. Sarah Collins is 39 now, still working retail for $14 an hour, still living with a video that has 35 million views and will never disappear. Jake Morrison is 46, still working warehouses, still paying the price for threatening a federal judge. Dennis Hart retired in disgrace at 58, his 30-year career ending with demotion instead of celebration. The lesson was expensive and public. Assumptions about who belongs in premium spaces based on skin color don't just hurt people. They destroy the careers of those who act on those assumptions. A federal judge sitting in first class wasn't there by mistake, by fraud, or by luck. He was there because he earned it, paid for it, and had every right to it. And when 3 Delta employees decided he didn't belong based solely on his race, they learned that consequences for discrimination are real, permanent, and devastating. If you believe no one should have to prove they belong in a seat they paid for, share this story. If you've ever been made to feel like you don't belong somewhere based on how you look, drop your experience in the comments. And if you believe billion-dollar companies should face real consequences for tolerating racism, subscribe, because we're bringing you more stories where discrimination met accountability and lost everything. Thanks for watching.